Hey guys, I'm back. I know I've kind of been off the radar a little bit. I've been working on my website. I'm actually in the process of redesigning it, so if you haven't checked it out in a while, keep an eye out for the changes. There's some really cool stuff now. I think it looks a lot cleaner, a lot better. So check out MeantToBeLindseyB.com and you'll see what I'm talking about. But I kind of wanted to share my thyroid cancer story. I just had an appointment with my thyroid doctor recently, and in July will be my 5-year mark. As long as everything goes well between now and then, mid-July will be when I hit my, I guess, official cancer-free diagnosis, which is awesome. I'm really grateful because I can remember when I was waiting for the day to hit the year mark. And so I just kind of want to share my journey with it. So I know I've talked about it in videos before, but I really just felt like I should make a dedicated video for this. So I was diagnosed in mid-June of 2013. And basically what happened was we were trying to start a family, and it just wasn't happening. I had symptoms of being pregnant, and I was even getting positive results. And then I would go to the doctor, he would do a blood test, and it was negative. And I went through that probably 5 or 6 times. I can't quite remember how many, but it was at least 4 or 5, and maybe even more, to the point that I was having symptoms. And even the doctor thought, okay, yeah, you are this time. And let me back up. When we were first starting to talk about, can we have kids? Don't know. We're just like, let's just see what happens. So we weren't really worried about it in the beginning. And I got pregnant the first try. And then I miscarried. So I spent some time dealing with that, coping with that, and I think that that's something that does stay with you when you experience it. So I struggled with that. And then it was kind of insult to injury because I kept getting false positives. So we were trying to figure out what was going on. And then in addition to that, I was having sleep problems. Now I can go look back at pictures and go, how did I miss that, But I had a giant knot in my neck. And what ended up happening was I finally said the right things in the right order to my doctor. And he said, well, have you ever had your thyroid checked out? I said, no. He said, well, let's just do a blood panel and see what happens. Let's see how your vitamin levels are and all of that. We'll go from there. And while we were talking, I said, well, now that you mention it, is this normal? And I showed him my neck, and, he was like, no, that's not normal. So we got the blood work back, and it said that I had something going on with my thyroid. That I had just abnormal thyroid levels, that it could be something, but it, could be just maybe I need thyroid medication. So we waited a while. It was actually a really long time, from like when I had the blood work to when they actually got me in for a biopsy to check the nodules that I had in my neck. It was months, and that was really tough. Especially when I get the biopsy back and it came back cancerous. I have made my peace with the fact that I've been dealt this situation. But when you're 27 and you go from, oh, well, you might need medication to, no, you have cancer and we need to get you into surgery. It's a bit overwhelming. I had my moment. It was actually very meant to be. I was supposed to go to that appointment by myself. I couldn't, Wes didn't think that he could get off of work, And so I was supposed to go, and basically I was supposed to have gotten this news by myself alone. And it just happened to work out that at the very last minute he was able to get off of work, and he was able to be there with me when I got the diagnosis. So I got my tears out, and then my mom came over that night. And at this point I had told her what was going on. She came down and stayed the night. Just, we just needed that time to process together, I think. And by the time she got there, I had already kind of processed. And so I felt like, okay, now I need to be strong for everybody else. And I remember, her being there that night, and the relief on her face when I started to finally get emotional again. So what ended up happening at that point was I knew I needed surgery, and I knew that there was a possibility of having to go through radiation. So I told my doctor, I said, give me a couple of weeks, let me process, let me take this all in, and we'll schedule surgery in like a couple of weeks. So I basically just got together with a whole bunch of friends like the weekend before my surgery, and we went out and we just had a good time together. I had 25 people probably out with me, and we went out and listened to music and did dinner and things like that. So I had my moment and kind of took a breath and went into the surgery. So don't ever Google thyroid cancer scars. It will scare you. I learned that the hard way. And so I built this up into my head, into this really big, horrible, worst case scenario thing. And I struggled. Like, I had the surgery. They went ahead and decided to go ahead and dose me with radiation, RAI 131 radiation, which is isolated to just the thyroid. And so it doesn't affect everything else necessarily, or they said. So I had a round of that, and then they checked me at the 6 month or 3 month and 6 month mark. They said, you still have cancer, so we're going to dose you one more time. But with 131, you can only be dosed up to 3 times in 10 years. And I had 2 doses in the first year. First time was difficult because I had just had my surgery and was basically put in a room at home by myself. I couldn't be around anyone for 72 hours because I was so radioactive that it would harm anybody else. So I had to be completely isolated for 72 hours, which is difficult because you were just diagnosed with cancer, and now they say go lay in a room for 3 days and think about having cancer, basically, is what it felt like. So that was hard, but I didn't really feel the effects of any of it outside of the first couple of weeks. I was in pain, obviously, immediately after surgery, but I was, I had just, I don't know, it didn't set in. And then when I hit the year mark and we went back in and they were like, it's still there, I had got rid of my doctor because we had already done surgery and we had 2 rounds of radiation, and I knew if I went through radiation again, it was only going to be worse. One of the other really frustrating things about radiation is, or at least this particular type of radiation, is they say, oh, you won't have any side effects, minimal, outside of, that 72 hours. They were wrong. No one warned me that I would still, 6 years later, 5.5 years later, I guess, have pain in my neck. Nobody warned me. Nobody warned me that radiation affects your salivary glands long-term, possibly. They made it sound like, oh yeah, it's just a short-term thing, it'll go away. Well, I still have pain in my neck 5.5 years later. And every time I get a cold or sinus infection or anything like that, I get pain in my jaw, I get pain under my neck, I have a lymph node still that gets inflamed, that feels like a giant pebble in my neck. So even after that first year when I got a new doctor, we still keep an eye on the salivary glands and the lymph nodes and all of that, because it only takes one lymph node to be cancer for it to spread. So it wasn't as short term as this first doctor said that it would be, which was also why I got a second doctor for the second surgery. Not only that, but when I went into radiation the second time, that doctor, first of all, they had me come in, 30 to 45 minutes early. So I'd already been there 45 minutes early. And then he was half an hour late. And then I wasn't even dosed by myself. I was in a room with another person, a man actually, who was much older than me, who was also being dosed with radiation of some form similar to RAI, but I think it may have even been a different type. And they can't talk about those things in detail in front of the other patient. So he was talking in code of, well, one of you is going to have this higher dose and one of you is going to have this dose. And so my experience was very different from that guy's. And they hadn't told this guy, be on restricted diet, a low iodine diet going in, because the iodine needs to attach to the thyroid cancer cells. And so we had gotten conflicting information, which I think made us both a little nervous. And then, I'm still questioning, one, why did they have us come so early if we were going to just sit there for that long? And then I'm still not even sure that they gave me the right dose of radiation. He claims that he did, but I have no proof of it. So needless to say, I was really frustrated. And, because I'm extremely radioactive, they give you the pill, they send you home immediately. Like, you wait for that long, and then the guy just sends me home after he made us sit there and wait. So needless to say, I was so mad about that situation. I was so frustrated because I felt like at that point that doctor didn't care. I got rid of him after that. I thought, what, if I'm still going to have to go through this and this is going to be a long-term lifetime diagnosis, I need a better doctor. So I did my research and got a much better doctor, and things are a lot better as far as that goes. So yeah, that was that part of that process. The other thing about irradiation too, at least that particular kind, is that it's hard to even help people understand that it has a half-life, and so I wasn't radioactive for long term, only those 72 hours, and then I could be exposed to people and Wes and all of that. But I couldn't be around him. I couldn't be around my dogs. I definitely couldn't be around somebody who was pregnant. If you throw up within the first, I think it's 24 hours, they have to have hazmat come in, and if you throw up on your carpet or your mattress or your sheets or anything fabric, they have to come in and take your mattress and destroy it because it's so radioactive. And so again, being isolated was really difficult. I did have some really amazing friends during both parts who I did FaceTime, and I had, coloring books and binge watched shows and all of that. And I got through it. I didn't really have an appetite, but the nice thing about REI is at least REI 131, is you don't necessarily lose your hair. And I don't know, and it may be different for the higher dosages, but at least on the 2 doses that I've had in my life, I didn't really have any of those types of long-term effects. And thankfully I didn't get sick in that short, 72-hour period either. So that wasn't a big deal. But it's kind of just another thing you had to worry about a little bit possibly too. And I was very nauseous the second time I went through it, so I was a little bit more worried about getting sick. I got through it. I was okay. I didn't really have an appetite, but that was kind of the worst of it. And two, I just kind of went through more of a depression. I kind of withdrew from people. I had a lot of people who wanted to be there for me the second time around, and I just handled it differently. I was a little more frustrated that time around, even though I knew what to expect. And I felt worse. So I wasn't really in the mood to, be on FaceTime and on the phone and, all of that. Another thing that happened was initially they told me I had stage 3 thyroid cancer. And then later on when I went through the second surgery, or before I went through the second surgery, they said, no, thyroid cancer doesn't really exist at stage 3 for your age range. You're actually at stage 1. So that was frustrating. And that was part of why I ended up getting another doctor, was because because this doctor misdiagnosed me at stage 3, which doesn't have nearly as good of a survival rate. I lived in a much deeper fear of not surviving for the first year, which is the hardest part, is the first year. And so I went and got a second opinion, and actually it was very much a meant to be thing, because I was pretty sure I was going to be facing a second surgery. I had already scheduled an appointment with a new thyroid doctor at this point. And Wes and I were sitting at dinner, and I overhear this person mention my new thyroid doctor's name just in passing. He was sitting at the next table over at dinner. And so I kind of stopped him on his way out, and I said, I'm sorry to eavesdrop, but you just mentioned this doctor's name. And he said, oh yeah, I'm an endocrine surgeon. And so we talked about my experience, and he said, well, hopefully you never need me, but if you do, here's my card. And within a couple of weeks, I was scheduling my second surgery with this doctor. So it was very, very meant to be that I was supposed to hear that conversation. And I'm really, really grateful that I did, because he was an awesome surgeon. And actually, I don't know, hopefully you all can see this, but I've talked about this before. I've actually had shots to kind of take out some of the redness of the scarring and kind of bring down the swelling. But anyway, so I had the second surgery with that doctor, and we haven't seen anything since then. So that's a really, really good thing. But at the same time, my counter for the 5-year cancer-free mark kind of got reset at the year mark, because we were starting at the second surgery. And that was the last time that we saw cancer, was before that surgery. So it reset the counter. So what I thought was going to be 5 years ended up being, now will be, 6. So it was hard, because I feel like there's a misconception that, and for some people it is, this is the case, but a lot of people think, oh, you have the surgery, you have the radiation, you're good. And thyroid cancer just is different. It's a slow growing cancer, and you're kind of in limbo if they can't get your levels right. And for me, since the second surgery, we've really, really struggled to get my thyroid levels balanced. And actually, and this is the point of this video, is I just got my most recent results back, and I'm in the last 6 months of the new 5-year mark. And this is the most level my levels have been. But again, they still made a medication change. And so honestly, that's been the hardest part of this. It's just the imbalance, because it is dealing with your hormones. It is fluctuations up and down, and you get used to one medication change, and then they say, oh, your medication's too high. So then they lower it, and then you have a drop in energy because you have less thyroid hormone in your body. So it's very, very complicated sometimes, because it is dealing with the hormones, and it's such a fine-tuning thing that since the second surgery was like the point where I didn't feel like myself anymore. I've spent the first year trying to figure out how the thyroid stuff really worked, got kind of used to how all of that worked, and then had the second surgery. And that's when I felt the energy drop. That's when it really started to mess with the hormones, and I just felt different that time around. That was also the point that I knew I didn't need to stay in a negative headspace. It's like I had let this control my life for a solid year, and I knew that if I was going through the second surgery, that I needed to start taking care of myself as good as possible. So I started working out. I started just taking better care of myself in general, being more proactive about going to the doctor and things like that. So it was a learning experience. It was a growing experience. And the second surgery was just kind of a turning point for me. And it was difficult. I did a half marathon 11 weeks after surgery, which I look back on that now and I was insane. But it was what I needed to do for me in the moment, because, the second surgery was kind of oh crap, this really is a big deal. And I had already started a bucket list and all of this stuff. And, I was learning how to deal with it and deal with the reality that even if I do get the cancer-free diagnosis, that I may never feel like myself ever again. That's hard. That was probably the hardest part. Because it slowed me down. And I wasn't ready to be slowed down. And it's interesting now because people will say, oh my gosh, you're so busy all the time. Well, I do that on purpose, because if I don't, I'll go crazy. So I stay busy, and that's been the hardest part this time around, is just finding balance and doing too much and getting through it emotionally. So, it's definitely changed my life as far as my routine and what I can do and how much I can handle and things like that. I definitely felt it after that second surgery more than the first surgery. But at the same time, the second surgery was easier in the sense that I knew what I was getting myself into. I knew I was going to have a more extensive surgery. I knew I was going to be in more pain because they were opening the incision, and there was going to be a drain in my neck because there was less tissue. And so there were just more risks involved. I actually stayed in the hospital a little bit longer the second time around, just to make sure that everything was safe, because I have dogs, and I didn't want to risk something happening and me not being able to handle them or whatever at home. So I chose to stay a couple of extra days just to heal a little bit faster and get that drain out and all of that. So that's the logistics of what happened. But as hard as it's been emotionally, and as much as it's changed me on the inside, it's changed me on the inside for the good too, because I needed to take better care of myself. And it's unfortunate that it took cancer for me to realize it, but I got there. So now I take breaks when I need it. I slow down when I feel like I need to slow down, and I just do what I feel like I need to do. And I've done a lot more research. I've been more proactive about keeping my vitamin levels in check, because certain vitamin levels can affect thyroid health, things like vitamin D and calcium and things like that, because part of the other thing that happened when I had the two surgeries was that they had to they removed 2 of my parathyroids the first time, and then a third one the second time, and you only have 4. So, and to not have to be on calcium for the rest of your life, you have to have at least one to function. So I do have to keep my calcium in check because it can dip down. My vitamin D levels can plummet. And so that's why I still go and get checked out. It's not necessarily that they see anything alarming, but we do have to keep an eye on certain levels just to make sure that they're where they need to be, because if a level changes up or down, not necessarily vitamin levels, but other thyroid levels change, that can leave me susceptible to more cancer cell growth. So we do have to keep an eye on it, and we'll have to keep an eye on it for the rest of my life unless there's some cure out there for all of this. But anyway, all of this is leveling out. This is the first year that it started to really be pretty stable. We did make a medication change, but it was a minor one, and all of my other levels were really good this time. I'm not undetectable as far as the cancer goes yet, but I probably never will be at a 0 undetectable, just because I have had thyroid tissue, and I will always have some thyroid tissue in my neck probably. So anyway, I don't really know. I actually expected this to be a lot more emotional. I'm actually really, really grateful that this video hasn't been as hard for me as I suspected that it might be. I did have a really emotional week last week, though, because again, people think, oh, you're cancer free, you're good, like you're in remission, and celebrate and have that moment. And like, I may never have that moment. I may never have that moment where, they may not see cancer, but at the same time, they may always be adjusting my medication. So it is different. It's not this celebratory thing that I thought that it was going to be. And it hasn't been. I'm grateful. I'm definitely appreciative of the fact that it's gotten better, and it's not as bad as it was, in 2013 or even 2014. But I haven't gotten to have that moment, and I may never get to. So that's the hard part. The other hard part, and I've mentioned this in one of my other, my earlier, way early videos, is that there's no such thing as a good cancer. And so I was kind of dealing with the fact that nobody understood it because I looked healthy. But if you go back and look at old pictures, you can tell that something wasn't quite right. Of course, if we're comparing it to me being healthier now, but we didn't know. We didn't know what to look for. And so pay attention to your body. I've said that before. Pay attention to warning signs, because I thought I had a sore throat, you guys. And I feel so silly now. And I went through blaming myself, and, that's probably the hardest part is you are sometimes in the position of feeling like you should have been more proactive. The other issue is, and I've talked about it in vague terms before, but another issue was after I started to have the false positives and we were starting to realize that maybe there was something going on, before I ever went to my primary care physician, before I ever even knew that I had a thyroid issue, we were looking into in vitro, because babies weren't happening, and it's okay that they weren't, because I wasn't healthy. I needed to take care of myself first. But because I was having the false positives, we were starting to look into in vitro and other options and just see, well, if we have to go this route, or, we weren't sure what was going on. We didn't know if it was because we're both in wheelchairs, or there was something else going on with him. And so my primary care physician, because he's a veteran, they were starting to get to the point where they were paying for in vitro for some disabled veterans. and he was eligible for that. But part of what had to happen for them to pay for it was that I had to be checked out. So we were actually in the beginning phases of, possibly going that route or seeing what all needed to happen for that to be an option. So we went to a reproductive endocrinologist 2 years before my cancer was diagnosed. And it's frustrating because she was an endocrinologist. She should have been able to detect this had she done anything helpful at all, and she didn't. She looked at us, saw that we were both in wheelchairs, and said, "Get a sperm donor," and sent us on our way. And I was so angry. And now, I am still angry because she could have helped me or helped us discover this sooner. I don't live in regret because it was part of the growing process. But man, it was awful. It sucked. It was not a good experience. It was very frustrating, especially once we realized that I had an endocrine issue. So again, know your body, listen to your body, and if you've got a doctor that's not taking care of you and not meeting your needs, go get a new doctor. You owe it to yourself, you owe it to your life and your happiness to not worry about that. There are so many other doctors out there, and you're going to find the right doctor, and you have to be your biggest advocate, because if you don't, you might not have anybody else that will. And yeah, I am still angry at that doctor. I've made peace with the fact that, it all led up to what it led up to. That's fine. Because again, I did need to take care of myself, and thankfully, I started the process of, taking care of myself first. But yeah, I find the right doctor. I'll just leave it at that. Do your research, but don't overwhelm yourself. I had a lot of people with really, really good intentions that would say, "Oh, try this, and oh, try that, and try this, vitamin and that." And, when you're already dealing with the fact that you maybe had this going on a lot longer than you realized, and you're dealing with, at least for me, I was dealing with guilt of not taking better care of myself. That's a really difficult thing to go through, when you know people are trying to be good intentioned, and you're being told, well, you should have done this, or you shouldn't be doing this, or did you know that this causes thyroid cancer, and this and that, whatever. That's a hard thing to hear, because you start to blame yourself even more for not doing the things that you maybe should have already been doing. But you can't change the past. You can only learn from it and grow from it and move forward. And again, that's what I chose to do. And granted, it took me a little longer than I would have liked it to have taken me, but I got there. I'm still not 100%. I still don't feel 100%. But I'm getting there. I'm still, I was in a really good place about it for a long time. Especially when I started doing my bucket list, and the key thing came into my life, and Shine On Music City was taking off, and people were getting things out of my blogs. That was the best part of it, because I saw the bigger purpose. Another part that I really feel like helped me in my recovery was once I discovered the Thyroid Cancer Survivors Association, and realized how much they help with thyroid cancer research and support and all of that, which was huge for me at the time. I mean, it still is. I really wanted to give back, and so part of what I did was I I put together a thyroid cancer benefit, and I had 3 artists or bands perform that night. Kind of, I mean, it was pretty much what I did when I got crowned Miss Wheelchair Tennessee, but with only musicians. I didn't do comedians, but that's what inspired my fundraiser for Miss Wheelchair Tennessee as well. And, you know, it raised a pretty good amount of money, and I donated all of it back to the Thyroid Cancer Survivors Association. So that was good for me to do, just on a personal level, to give back to a resource that I felt was really valuable to me, and help me find a positive way to give back through my circumstances. Now that my life is slowing down because I've let it, it's given me more time to worry about things and think about things too much. Don't spend a lot of time dwelling on it, though. Move forward. You'll get through this, but take care of yourself. You only get one life, and you owe it to yourself to live, you know, as healthy of a life as possible. And don't let other people's opinions cloud your judgment or cloud how you feel about your process. Don't let somebody else's opinion alter your grieving process of going through something like this. You're allowed to grieve. You're allowed to process and process as long as you need to. You're allowed to get through something hard, cancer, whatever it is, however you need to get through it, because emotional survival is the most important part of all of this. And that's why I go to shows. I go to listen to music, because that's what makes me happy. That's what gets me out of the headspace of, this is what I'm dealing with on the side. And yes, you do need to face reality and deal with the cards that are given to you, but you are allowed to just take a breather if you need it. So anyway, I don't know. I really just wanted to get my story out there, because I haven't talked about every single thing, every aspect of this. And yeah, take care of yourself. But don't beat yourself up if something comes up. Just do what you need to do from that point forward. You can't change the past. You can only grow from it. That's my advice. You'll be okay. You're going to have bad days, but you could have some really good days, and you never know how your story can help somebody else, or your experience can help somebody else. So embrace it a little bit if you can. You don't have to like it. You don't have to sit there and succumb to your illness necessarily. You can have power in a situation even when you feel powerless. So don't lose sight of that. You know, for me, I got into the gym. You know, I cut out foods and drinks with red dye as much as possible. You know, I did little things, started taking vitamins and just stuff, you know, that I had read or researched a little bit on that I felt could help. And I'm starting to feel a little bit better. I'm not 100%, but I'm getting there. That's all you can do. It's baby steps. And you're going to go through phases that, or at least I went through phases where sometimes I wish I didn't have to deal with it. But being in denial doesn't change reality, you know. Anyway, this is kind of a weird vlog, but that's my experience. I haven't talked about, you know, parts of this before, because like the miscarriage was really difficult in itself. And then to also discover later down the road that I had thyroid cancer on top of that later on, I had to figure out how to deal with that. And I wasn't sure if I wanted everybody to know all of the details, but I have gone through a miscarriage. It was awful. It was its own grieving process, separate from everything else. But if it weren't for that, I wouldn't have necessarily realized that something else was going on. So it's actually really good that I discovered it through symptoms like that. So one piece of advice that I would give people that are maybe facing this is find a support system because that made the biggest difference for me. And I say that about everything, and this is why. My resources got me through it, through the hardest parts of it anyway. And so I don't remember, I guess the first year I didn't really have any support. I mean, I had family and friends support, but I didn't have any support within the thyroid cancer community necessarily. And so when I got the doctor that I have now, I found out about the support groups and things like that. There's a Nashville support group, and there's also national conferences for thyroid cancer survivors, and educational thyroid seminars and things like that. So that was actually, that was a huge part of my recovery, was just getting involved in that community, figuring out what I was dealing with, figuring out what other people's experiences were, because I had nothing to compare it to. Any experience I had, or that I knew of, no one had had actual cancer, or they didn't have cancer and they were 20 years older. And, my father-in-law, he had a nodule, and they took half of his thyroid out, and he was fine, and isn't on medication or anything even now. So, I had seen what he went through with his surgery, but he was pretty much fine almost immediately. So I knew I wasn't necessarily dealing with the same thing that he did. But knowing his experience and knowing what he went through did sort of prepare me a little bit for it. It kept me, I think that actually helped me stay a little bit more level-headed, going into it the first time. And so that's just part of what I feel like helped me through some of the harder parts of it all. I guess that's it, you guys. I am sorry. This is kind of a weird one. It's different. It's just part of my journey that I haven't really shared to the full extent. Not even really in my writing. So, I don't really know what my message is, except to say, take care of yourself. However you need to. It's fine to take advice from people, but you have to do what's right for you and your health and your life, and get through it. You'll be fine. If you are dealing with thyroid issues right now, and you need advice or you need some resources, please reach out to me. I know I was given this story for a reason. I know I was given these circumstances for a reason. So don't be afraid to reach out. Please ask questions. This is your life. It's your situation. And I would be more than happy to at least point you in the right direction for some really great resources that may be able to help you out more than even I can. So anyway, for everybody else, sorry for the thyroid cancer rant, but it's part of my story, and I need to own it, and I have owned it, and I felt like it was time to share it. So I love you guys. Again, thank you for being patient with me. I know I've been off the radar a little bit, but I've had a lot going on that I'm really excited to be able to share with you, and hopefully in the very, very near future, as far as like what I'm doing with my life behind the scenes that you all haven't seen yet. So I love you guys. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, make sure that you subscribe and share this video. If you think it's going to help somebody, please share it. That's why I started this channel. I love you guys. I will talk to you soon. Bye.